Well, hello and welcome to Binge Watch, the podcast where we take a look at the hottest new TV and film releases on streaming television platforms. I'm Hannah Fernando, the group editor of Woman and Woman and Home magazine.
And I'm Ian McEwan, writer on TV and Satellite Week, What's on TV and TV Times magazines. And today we're looking at the new releases that will be available from Friday the 27th of September 2024, including Sam Neill and Annette in thriller Apples Never Fall on BBC iPlayer, and Will Ferrell's road trip with his recently transitioned close friend in the Netflix documentary Will and Harper.
And we'll also be checking out new sleuthing comedy Ludwig, starring David Mitchell and Anna Maxwell Martin on BBC iPlayer, and boxing documentary series Four Kings on Prime. But first what is in the news?
The Paramount Plus drama JonBenet Ramsey, about the unsolved murder of the 6-year-old pageant queen, will star Melissa McCarthy and Clive Owen as her parents, Patsy and John. What else is in the news, Hannah?
Alfred Molina, Gina Davis, Alfre Woodard and Bill Pullman will star in Netflix sci-fi drama The Boroughs about a New Mexico retirement community battling a supernatural threat. Sounds right up my street.
Sounds a bit like Cocoon. Anyway, a nice selection for you this week. I think we've got some drama, we've got some comedy, we've got a road trip documentary, and we've got a sports documentary series. We're going to start with the first of two offerings on BBC iPlayer, arriving as a box set on Wednesday the 25th of September. It's a new comedy drama called Ludwig. And here's a clip.
DCI Taylor. Good morning.
Oh, hello. Sir, I'm impersonating a police officer.
Oh, yes, but he's your brother.
James didn't just vanish. It's a puzzle. Puzzles are meant to be solved. Oh, there's sugar in it. Which, as you know, is exactly how I like it. Cheers. And with a murder. But what if there's another one today? How often do people get murdered around here?
David Mitchell starred in the best sitcom ever made, Peep Show. And so it's very good to see him back on our screens in an acting capacity rather than getting angry in a very articulate way on panel shows. And he plays the lead in this. He is David, who is a puzzle setter, and his pen name is Ludwig, after the composer Beethoven, of whom he is very fond. And it co-stars Anna Maxwell Martin as his sister-in-law, Lucy. Know her from Motherland, and of course she was great in Line of Duty. She's so versatile, isn't she? David is one of two identical twin brothers, and his brother James is a copper, but he mysteriously goes missing and sends this rather unusual letter to his wife, who smells a rat. Long and short of it is, she persuades David. He's very reclusive, really, and he's very old-fashioned. He doesn't really like the modern world or even leaving his flat. She convinces him to pose as his twin brother so that he can go into the police station, go into his office and retrieve this notebook that hopefully will unravel the mystery. But of course, it doesn't really go according to plan, and he ends up just having to kind of immediately go off on a murder case. So I think it's great. It's very stylish, actually. The opening titles are terrific, and the first scene, really well done. And I just love the combination of, it's got the comedy element, it's got the kind of puzzle setting, sleuthing kind of element as well, and the really nice relationship between David and Lucy, and also she has a son as well. So I absolutely loved episode 1, and also the theme tune. Listen to that, because it's very cleverly references Beethoven as well in a nice way. So yeah, something a bit different. I liked it immediately, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all unravels. What did you think, Hannah?
Quite fun, isn't it? A sort of as you say, you mentioned about David Mitchell and, you know, being on panels, and I do love him on Would I Lie to You? And he does argue in a very articulate fashion, but also kind of recognises his eccentricity at times as well. So I've got a bit of a fond spot for him. And this is just... It's just something really different, and he says, doesn't he, that he's always wanted to play a part like this, and this is the part for him. And it has got that sort of that comedy, but that sort of serious element. It's all kind of wrapped up in one. And I don't think before I'd seen it, I don't think I'd have thought he would be that good in it. That sounds really awful, but I don't know. I think he's so kind of sort of stereotyped now, if you like, that actually this just shows what else he can do, and that actually he's really rather brilliant.
I should add that it's set in Cambridge, of course, and it's got some good guest stars coming up in future episodes. Felicity Kendall from The Good Life, Rose Ayling-Ellis from Strictly, and Sir Derek Jacobi. Yes, not bad. Moving across to Netflix, we have a new feature-length documentary which arrives on Friday the 27th of September. It's called Will and Harper, and here's a clip.
A long time ago, back when I was at Saturday Night Live, I met a guy who was hired as a writer the same week I was hired. He wrote a bunch of sketches for me and eventually became the head writer of SNL. And over the years, he became one of my closest friends. And then one day, I got this email. Hey, Will, something I need you to know. I'll be transitioning to live as a woman.
Yes, well, if you're a fan of Will Ferrell, then you can properly fangirl like I did, because this is just, honestly, it brought, from what I've seen of it, has absolutely brought tears to my eye, really. It was just something really lovely about this, and something really sad, and something very happy, and kind of every emotion rolled into one with this. And so this is Will Ferrell as himself. It's a documentary, and it's based on his friendship with his good friend Harper Steele, who he'd been friends with for some 30 years, which actually is really quite nice, because they sort of, I suppose it's back in the beginning to a degree when they started out, and they just remained amazingly good friends. And Harper Steele isn't necessarily a name that you'd go, oh yeah, I know them. Of course you don't. And this is about 3 years ago. He told Will that he was going to transition, was come out as a trans woman. And in this documentary, you see the two of them embark on this 2-week road trip from New York to LA. And I suppose it's to work out what that means, what it will do to their friendship, and how it will change their friendship potentially. Well, Will Ferrell is, as we all know, really very funny. So there are some really sort of tickling moments here, and I particularly like the one about the driving. He said, since you've become a woman, has your driving become worse? And it's just a particularly funny moment. But equally, there are moments where you see Will tear up, get upset. I suppose he sees to a degree some of the difficulties that his friend is having to go through. It's not an easy choice or decision to make. And then you see them talk about how they've always felt different, and how I think it was probably from the age of, I think they said it was either 3 or 5. How they felt different to who they should have been or who they were. It's just the things that they would have done together perhaps aren't as possible anymore. Choosing different things to do together. Will seeing it through his friend's eyes. Someone calls her bro, and he says, actually, it's my friend, it's a woman. And it's really tough in places, but equally, as I say, all the emotions kind of rolled into one. I found myself really tearing up in places. I felt it was really incredibly moving to see these two, their friendship that is clearly unbreakable. The support that Will gives is amazing. And how hard it is to perhaps feel safe in this situation, and feel that it's okay to be who you really are. So there's lots of messages, lots of takeaways from this, lots of happy moments, tears of joy, tears of sadness. But I think I thoroughly recommend it. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And it reminded me of a superb film called Transamerica, starring Felicity Huffman as a trans woman taking a road trip after unexpectedly discovering that she is a mother. Anyway, so yeah, Will Ferrell, much loved comic star, larger than life. But you're seeing a very different side of Will Ferrell in this, because he's just being himself for the most part. Although right at the beginning, there's they're interviewing him straight to camera, and he's saying, "I'm Will Ferrell, one of the world's greatest actors," which is hilarious. But mostly it's just him being himself with his mate Harper. And I hope that it will answer a lot of questions people might have about transitioning, because Harper's was a family man, now a family woman, obviously. So we meet her kids. And Will is sort of asking the questions. I should say, Hannah, statistically, women are safer drivers. Just asking the questions that we might all have about transitioning from a man to a woman. And Harper's very articulate about what she's going through. But there's also a darker side to it as well, because at one point they go to a restaurant in Texas, and Will does a sort of steak eating competition, and there's lots of horrible tweets afterwards from people who either were there or who've seen a photograph of the two of them on social media. So it just reminds you of the awful abuse that trans people often suffer. But I hope this will dispel some of the prejudices with any luck. And it's also just a picture of a really lovely friendship that dates back to when they were both on Saturday Night Live, the brilliant American sketch show where Harper was the writer and Will was one of the big stars. So yeah, something very different. And I found it really moving and thoroughly interesting. So yeah, recommended. Over on Prime Video, arriving on Friday the 27th of September, we have a new documentary series called Four Kings, and here's a clip.
We have never seen black athletes grabbing the headlines like this.
It was insane.
A lot of people like me in England.
Yeah, I would say I've got a big ego. I've really got a big ego.
I was not just odd, I was on a different planet.
I believe God put Maradona on this earth, score goals, Steve Davis to pop balls, and Nigel Benn to kick ass.
Cast your mind back, Hannah, to the 1980s and 1990s, the golden era of British boxing. Four superstars, Frank Bruno and Lennox Lewis, both heavyweights, of course, and Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn, who were middleweights. And this four-parter is all about them. And it's not one episode per fighter, that they all appear in all four episodes and they're interviewed, and there's lots of archive footage. It's really good, I've got to say. So it starts off looking back at how boxing was had quite a racist audience back in the day. But these guys became the preeminent British boxers, and they were all black. And so you're hearing their stories. I mean, everyone will be aware of Chris Eubank, who is a highly eccentric individual. And he had a terrific rivalry with Nigel Benn, a.k.a. the Dark Destroyer, who clearly still has quite strong feelings about Eubank. So they look back on their rivalry. You've got Frank Bruno, and a reminder of how in his day, I mean, they kind of say he's like the most loved person in Britain, and he certainly was. And then, of course, with hindsight now, we know he suffered sort of severe mental health issues. But yeah, we see him taking on Tyson, and then Lennox Lewis, of course, who was born in Britain but grew up in Canada and won a gold medal for Canada at the Olympics. But he kind of felt that he wanted to be the next Bruno, but he felt that like the British public never really embraced him in the way that they loved Frank. I mean, I don't like boxing. I absolutely hate seeing people being beaten to a pulp in the name of sport. I think it's awful. And I think one day we'll look back on boxing in the way we kind of do on bullfighting or, gladiatorial contests in ancient Rome, because it's savage. It really is awful. But these are fascinating stories, and they're really good interviews. You won't believe what Chris Eubank is wearing. He's been through various phases with his looks, hasn't he? So, yeah, it's a fascinating look at a really interesting time. I mean, in British society as well, and how that was kind of reflected in these guys and their images as well. Ben was very much about, I want the money, I want the cars, I want the party lifestyle. You don't have to be a boxing fan at all. It's just really fascinating profiles and a snapshot of two particular periods from relatively recent British history. What did you think, Hannah?
Well, I actually really like things like this because with documentaries like this, sporting, cars, you don't have to massively into it, but it's sort of part of history, isn't it? And you learn something. I'm with you, I don't particularly like boxing, but I do know that it's a sport that a lot of people do love. Just this, last weekend there was a big fight, wasn't there, pay to view, and people wanted to watch it, although you spend all that money and it was out pretty quickly. But there's something about it, and it's sort of in a way it does feel very odd to have a place in modern society, I think, but it does still. And this kind of gives some context to it all, I think, to a degree. I mean, them looking back on the successes of the days. I mean, the funny thing is that all of these names, Frank Bruno, Lennox Lewis, Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, all these great names, I kind of wonder whether in 15, 20 years we'll be saying the same about the new ones coming through. I don't know. But there's a sort of interest in these people's lives to a degree. We sort of felt like we knew them. And so seeing them look back and talk about it is great. And as you say, Chris Eubank, what he's wearing is quite fun. I feel like you get to know them. And I always wonder how this many years on or whatever, what it does to you, like you say, just sort of being beaten up and, how difficult that must be. And actually, does it leave any kind of detrimental effect in the long term? I don't know. But, the competition of it, the kind of the level they got to, the pressures that were on them, it's quite pacey. It's quite exciting. So I don't think you need to be a boxing fan to watch this and like it. I think it's a piece of history, really, a slice of history.
We're going to finish over on BBC One and BBC iPlayer with a new drama series that drops as a box set on Saturday, the 21st of September. It's called Apples Never Fall, and here's a clip.
You've reached Joy Delaney. Leave a message and I'll call you back. Mailbox full. Goodbye.
Something bad has happened to Mom. I've left 5 messages. If she's not returning our calls or texts, it's because she can't.
Joy Delaney, mother 4, has gone missing.
Yes, so I'm a little bit obsessed with this. I watched the first episode and I'm rather hooked because I don't know what it is about this. It's not, it sounds awful, it's not particularly brilliant. I mean, it's not groundbreaking. It's kind of like a mystery that's being solved by family, but I don't know, it hooked me immediately. I suppose because, let's go back to the beginning. This is about a family. So the main couple is Stan and Joy Delaney. They are respected tennis coaches and you see them retiring and they seem on the surface to be a really happy family. They've got 4 grown-up children who all seem to adore them. They have family meals. They've got seemingly quite a lot of money, and they're just enjoying their retirement and having a lovely time, except Joy goes missing. And the dad says, oh, she's just at the mall, just kind of passes it off. And then one of the sons can see from her bank account that actually no money's been spent for, I think it was 48 hours, and certainly not in the mall. And the other children don't want to believe it. It's all kind of quite light-hearted and silly. But whilst they do seem to have it all, and they do seem to be this happiest family, what's lurking beneath? And it got me thinking, because so many families are like this, aren't they? And in the era of social media, where you kind of have the edited highlights on people's Instagram or Facebook or whatever your choice is, the reality of what's going on behind closed doors is often very, very different. And I suppose that's what's intrigued me about this, because it's kind of, this is in real time on the screen, and actually this is something quite different. So the husband, Stan, who's played by Sam Neill, Joy's played by Annette Bening, is sort of the number one suspect, really. And their children really take on the job to kind of do some digging. But, you know, unfortunately, with 4 children, you're unlikely to all think the same way, so you can kind of imagine what happens. As you know, they think differently. It causes, you know, once upon a time they were all very close. You know, can that really last? And you learn things about the dad that you perhaps didn't know before, because it was the mum that did all the talking. She seemed to be the sort of pressure cooker to a degree, but again, behind closed doors, what was it really like? To the outside world, one thing; inside, perhaps something else. So I find it quite fascinating. It's a little bit of jumping to and from at the beginning, but I don't usually like that, but in this I didn't mind it at all. And as I say, this is one I am going to binge watch, because I want to know what's gone on. And there's just something, it's quite glamorous, it's set in a beautiful place, and yeah, it's just I couldn't get myself off the sofa, I'm not gonna lie. What do you think, Ian?
It's not dissimilar to Perfect Couple, the Nicole Kidman series, which we talked about recently. That's on Netflix, which started with a body being discovered and then flashes back to kind of uncover all the dynamics of a wealthy family. And as you say, in this case, it starts with a disappearance. In fact, it's quite funny, because you see Annette Bening cycling along, and the next thing you know, her bicycle's in the road and all these apples have fallen onto the road. Do you see what they've done there? It's sort of trashy, but it is well done. It's glossy and it's got star power. I mean, it's interesting to see Sam Neill being cast against type, because he's a pretty nasty individual in this. He's an ex-tennis pro. And you see this family dinner in episode 1, and it's, you know, he's just being really horrible to his kids. He's vile, and he's really like competitive dad. He still wants to beat them all at tennis. Bening is great as the mum, who's sort of, they're both retiring because they're giving up their tennis academy, and like she doesn't really know what life has to offer. And then there's a sort of cuckoo in the nest, this young woman who knocks on their door in the middle of the night and has apparently been sort of abused by her partner. And Bening kind of takes her under her wing. One of the kids is one of my favourites, Alison Brie. Oh, she's fantastic. And of course, she was in Glow, the female wrestling drama series, which if you haven't seen, you must watch it. It's on Netflix and it's brilliant. It's actually based on a book by the woman who wrote Big Little Lies, okay? And it's clearly trying to be a second Big Little Lies. It's not as good, but I think it's got enough about it. I mean, you know, a lot of the dialogue's quite clunky and expositional, and you know, some of the characters are a little bit broad, but I think there's enough in it to make it an entertaining watch. Well, we've got to that time, Hannah, where we find out what you've been binge watching for the last week.
Well, apart from the fact that I can't stop watching what we've just talked about, Apples Never Fall, but I also stumbled across the Matthew Perry documentary with the kind of all the old footage, and it's on Amazon Prime, Matthew Perry, Not Just Friends. It's really sad, especially with all the information that's kind of come to light subsequently. So I did watch that. And then I cheered myself up with Strictly, because of course it is Strictly season, which means we're in the rundown to Christmas.
Happy days. Well, I've just been on holiday, so I had a hell of a lot to catch up on when I got back, including, well, I've only watched the the opening show of Strictly, which I see the Daily Mail, of course, is putting the boot into Strictly and the BBC as usual. But I thought it was great. I think it's a fantastic lineup, and they're very funny as well, some of the competitors. I mean, Chris McCall's on that, so had me in stitches. So, can't wait. And of course, goodness me, Married at First Sight UK, Hannah, that's going to take over my life for weeks to come.
Ian. Yes, Ian.
Well, we've just got time to look ahead to next week's offering. So what is on the Binge Watch menu, Hannah?
Sophie Turner plays real-life jewel thief Joan Hannington in a 1980s set crime drama called Joan on ITVX.
And Charlie and Nick have some talking to do as the hit Netflix drama Heartstopper returns. So we look forward to those and much, much more. But in the meantime, listeners,
keep watching.